A very good morning to you all. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the third lecture series organized by Center for Research and Preservation of Cultural Heritage together with the Department of History and the Department of Hindi under the aegis of Internal Quality Assurance Cell. This lecture series provides a forum to bring forth new areas of research and engage in conversation with outstanding scholars from interdisciplinary fields. I would now like to take this opportunity to welcome our speaker, Madam Sophie Dieckmann, who has kindly agreed to speak on Hindi journals and domesticity and the Marwari community in Colonial Calcutta, in spite of her hectic schedule. Without much delay, I would like to call upon our Principal Sir, Dr. Pradeep Shantapakundu, our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Abul Hussain, and our Honorable Speaker to the dais. I would now request our Principal Sir to present the speaker with a token of appreciation from the college. I would request our Principal Sir, who himself is an erudite scholar of history and the patron of this event, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, my respected colleagues and beloved students. It is an honor to welcome our invited speaker today, Sophie Dieckmann. Sophie is a research scholar at the South Asian Institute of Heidelberg University, Germany. She has undertaken a research project on the Marwari community in Colonial Calcutta through the lens of Hindi journals published in the early 20th century. In her research, Sophie explores the domestic world of the minority community. You know, the Marwari community of Kolkata is renowned for its entrepreneurial expertise in an area where business is often met with apathy and considered less respectable than service professions. This phenomenon has its root in the colonial legacy. Following the collapse of the Union Bank in the mid-19th century, affluent Bengali business families leaned towards salaried jobs, independent professions like law and publication, and investment in landed estates. In contrast, the Marwari community prioritized business ventures, establishing a dynamic business tradition in colonial Bengal. However, Marwari business enterprises were well dominated, with women largely excluded from these activities and confined to their homes. Their Bengali counterparts experienced somewhat better circumstances as the 19th century Bengal Renaissance prioritized women's upliftment. Reformers like Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar, Vidyasagar tirelessly championed the cause of women's rights. Eventually, the Marwari community followed the path paved by these Bengali social reformers, evidenced by their initiatives promoting women's education. We are eager to learn from Sophie's presentation and her research findings. I am confident that her doctoral research will deepen our understanding of the Marwari community's inner world in Kolkata and Bengal. Sophie, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for visiting our college and sharing your ongoing research with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, sir. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce our guest speaker, Madam Sophie Dieckmann. She is pursuing her doctoral studies from Heidelberg University. She has completed her master's in modern South Asian studies from Leipzig University. She has presented her master's thesis on migration journey, traveling and nostalgia, travel narratives in Hindi literature in the University of Vienna. She is also working as a research assistant for historical diary project in Heidelberg University. She has also been the co-editor of a monthly newsletter for Indology Department, Leipzig University. Presently, she is also working as a translator for Goethe Institute, Maximula Bhavan, Kolkata. Welcome, Sophie. The stage is all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the warm welcome. I will present my PhD topic, but I will give a disclaimer because it's still very much work in progress. I am still in the collecting phase of my material, so I'm expecting more findings from the journals I'm looking at, because this is still my first year and I can just show you what I've come up with so far. And as has been mentioned already, my topic is Hindi journals, domesticity, and the Marwari Community in Colonial Calcutta. And I will give you a very short introduction of myself and my academic background to show you how I arrived at this very specific topic. Then I will tell you about my experience in the archives in Calcutta, and also the material that I found. I will give a short definition of my PhD research so far, the findings, the literature I used, and also my outlook, because I still think there will be a few years for me to work on all this. But before I start, I hope that at the end of this presentation I can answer the question that Abhijit Gupta asked in one of his essays. What on earth could possibly induce young women and men in the prime of their lives to sit in ill-lit reading rooms and inhale the carefully preserved dust of 19th century Calcutta? I hope I can answer that question for myself by the end of this. So, as has been said already, I have studied in Leipzig University during my bachelor's and master's. So Leipzig is here. It's in the east of Germany, but I'm enrolled in Heidelberg, which is very much in the southwest. I still live in Leipzig, but I commute to Heidelberg at times. So I'm officially enrolled there since October 2023, last year. And my bachelor's thesis was on Hindi women's journals and women's columns in early 20th century. And that brought me into contact with archives for the first time, because I went to London and I visited the SOAS archive and British Library, mostly the India Office records. And that was like a treasure hunt for me, for the first time looking at the catalogs, index, talking to archivists, and then being sent on to some other place. And finally I found the journals I was not expecting to find. So I worked on these, I analyzed it, I translated these articles, and then I moved on. And during my master's, that was during COVID, I decided to write on travel writing. So during a time when no one could travel, I analyzed travelogues. And initially I wanted to write on female travelogues or female writers, but during that time, the early 1920s and 30s, it wasn't very common for women to publish their writing, although there must be more. So I came across a lot of travel writings on Shimla, and I decided to analyze these. I had 6 authors, one of them was a woman, luckily for me, and my material for that master's thesis came from the Endangered Archives project. So after contacting a lot of librarians in Germany at a time when I couldn't visit any of these places, they told me to look at the collection there. And that was very eye-opening because I found a lot of material, which is actually digitized by CRPCH, so the circle closed at one point, Centerspur. And after I've done that, I also worked as a student assistant for an archive project called MIDA. And they are working on documents that on Indo-German relations since the first Tranquebar mission, so the missionaries in South India, till German reunification. And what they do is they go from, they start from a city. They started at universities, university collections, and they put it in a database for later researchers to find. And it can be anything. It can be on cultural or business, industrial topics. And it turned out that there's a lot of material that is still to be uncovered. It's not digitizing everything, but it tells you where to find it exactly and the content of the archival material. So that gave me a lot of input for how to work in German archives, how to access them, how to work with their different systems, and also with the material itself, because it's very strict in comparison to how I work with material here. They have very heavy guidelines of how to use it. But yeah, I found that very interesting, and it brought me here. So with that background, I have these 6 topics that have always followed me in my research. So I have the early 20th century as the period I'm studying. I have always had an interest in literary studies, and Hindi became my working language. And that led me to look at journals. Travel writing came in, and I hope I can pursue that. And also gender-related issues. So now I'm coming to how I found my topic. My main wish was to work on Calcutta and its history, but I also knew that Bengali literature had been very much researched on. It's a very well-known subject. And I wondered if there is not space for looking at Hindi literature, which is lesser known, or it's lesser known that it was a very big part of the literary landscape. So, combining Calcutta and Hindi literature, I came across the Marwaris, who were the promoters of Hindi in especially early 20th century. And that was very broad, so I had to come and find my supervisors and try to propose setting up the topic. And my supervisors are Professor Hans Harder from Heidelberg University, who's very renowned for working on vernacular languages, also Bengali and Hindi, travel writing, so it fit perfectly. And my second supervisor is Dr. Ira Sharma from Leipzig University, who's also working on literary studies, minorities, Hindi, and they have always been very good guides and mentors. So now to my sources, my archives. I first browsed the secondary literature, and especially 2 names came up. That was Rahul Parson, who works on Marwari novels, and also the literary heritage they have left. And Anne Hartgrove, who works on, who looks at Marwaris from an anthropological view. And their works helped me to locate the archives and also journals that I might want to look at. Then I came into contact with Alka Sarugi, the Hindi author, and she helped me with secondary literature and also locating libraries, and anything related to Marwari culture in Calcutta. I work with the CRPCH, with Abhijit Bhattacharya, who also is very well acquainted with everything, all the libraries. And that led me to Mahavidyalay Library in Calcutta. And as you can see, this is one of the index. The other one is from 1955. So there's no digital catalog. I didn't expect it, but it was still adventurous to work with this one. I think this one is handwritten even. But they have a very big collection, and through that I came to the journal I'm looking at this time. It's Vishwamitra. It has been published in the 1930s till, there's actually no closing date, but I'm looking at 1935 till 1945 right now. And it's a big collection because it was a monthly journal. And when I was looking at it, I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I just wanted to browse. So I saw all the typical topics of that time, that is World War II and the independence movement. But then also, there were many themes that I didn't expect, and they were the main part of the journal. That was women's education and women's rights, marriage and the husband-wife relationship. There was a lot of that. Also, the state of widows, the rights of widows. There were articles on divorce and child rearing or maternity in general, health, and also the women's movement within India and also outside. And every journal or every issue had a women's column called Mahila Sansa, with very short articles and pictures, a lot of pictures of women, like role models, politicians, authors. And that gave me the idea to go deeper into that topic. So some of these articles are here, the translations are still very rough, but there's a vast array of these kind of articles. So we have again legal rights, the question of having a husband or children or both, women's education, of course, similarities between women and men, and also maternal mortality. And that was not just in the women's column, but also in the rest of the journal. And this is what I'm looking at. So now, defining my actual PhD research. The first question I had to ask was, who are the Marwaris? And when I Google, if I Google Marwaris, I get horses, the ones with the pointed ears, or information on the language, on the dialect. And all the other information is very, very broad, and it's the same definition. So what I came to work with is that Marwaris are defined as an ethnic community that is very strongly attached to, through social, financial, and migratory networks. And they emphasize their origin in what is today Rajasthan. And as everyone will know, the Marwaris worked very closely with the British colonial government at various levels. It was money lending, but also trading, and that came to be one of their strongest activities during that time. However, during the first decades of the 20th century, they also took up cultural and political work, and they became involved in the social reformist discourses and the independence movement of the time, like anyone else, but just a bit more later than the Bengalis and North Indian communities. And they also discussed the role of Indian women and also Marwari women in that case. And through their participation in these discourses, they claimed public space in Calcutta, and they negotiated their identity. because it became clear to them that they would stay in the city. So they had to find out, how do we belong and how do we identify in relation to the Bengali majority community and also the British colonial government. And they also needed to define their own community within themselves, so their own self-image. Who are we, and what do we want to be for the people outside? And that not only happened through political issues, but also through these gender-specific debates. That's one of my arguments. And these debates became very political as well. They just didn't happen on the streets, like demonstrations. And domesticity and the role of Indian women took up the biggest part of that. So I'm trying to fill the gap between the knowledge that is there. So everyone knows that Marwaris are very successful in business, later on became very successful in industry as well. But that is very male-oriented and also very patriarchal system as everywhere in the world still. So I was asking the question, where are the women? How are they portrayed? What is their role? And because they are there, they are written about, but what do they say about themselves? I just wanted to make them more visible and widen the aspects of Marwari life, because without the women, the business might not have been so successful. So that is my plan, to look beyond the purely political and just show what is there. And that brings me to study the publishing industry in Colonial Calcutta and the literary landscape. So it has always been really dynamic, and newspapers and magazines have been published since a very long time. But people hardly study the Hindi aspect of it. So through magazines, a very broad audience was reached, and it was a very essential component of political and cultural discourses in India at that time. And a few experts in Hindi will know that the first Hindi newspaper was actually printed and published in Calcutta. It was Udan Pathan in 1826, but after a few years, that journal was stopped. It didn't get published anymore because of a lack of readership. So by that time, it turned out that there was hardly any interest in promoting Hindi, not in Calcutta. And that changed since the 1850s, when more and more Marwaris arrived in Barazar in the north of Calcutta, and they took up that space for their daily life and also their business. There was no real distinction at that time. And that's why the whole area became the commercial space, the commercial hub of the city. And at the same time, most of the printing and publishing happened there as well. And there were countless publications in various languages. We had not only Bengali and Hindi, but also Urdu. Hindi became more and more used as a language of communication for the Marwaris, because they had very different local dialects at that time. So how would they communicate with each other? They just became a community through the language. And the most important medium for that was the monthly magazine. And they published about contemporary news and the Second World War and the independence movement, as I said, to define themselves, but also to find their own role in India and in Calcutta at that time. But as I also mentioned, there were numerous articles on women's education, emancipation, the role of women, also the role of men, marriage, household, and family in a broader way in society as well. And although these topics, as has been said already by Professor Kundu, they had been a very essential part of Bengali and North Indian Hindi language publications, for the Marwaris it became important much later. And they tried to clarify their identity especially since the 1920s. That was mostly because the women came from their villages in today's Rajasthan. They started arriving in the city since then, more settling there. That is also to do with the railway, by the way. It was safer for them to travel. And when the women came, it became clear that the families would stay. And there was another factor for defining their own identity, and that was a special issue by the famous Hindi journal Chand. That was the Marwari Ank in November 1929. And that changed everything. Like, that was really the turning point. Because in that issue, you had all the stereotypes about Marwaris written about, and most of them negative. And contributors were also Marwaris themselves, at least they claimed to be. But you had all these stereotypes that you might still have today, that they're very conservative, very business-oriented, nothing else. And it seems that the Marwaris didn't want to let that go just that easily. So every other publication after that was a reaction to Chand's special edition. And because Chand was a high circulating magazine in North India, it was published from Allahabad, and as I said, it had a very far-reaching impact. So to sum up a little my academic background for this doctoral research is that I'm looking at the Hindi public sphere from a linguistic, literary, and also social-political perspective. And you might have heard about the Hindi public sphere. There's very good work on that from Francesco Orsini and also Shobna Nijawan. And I will read out a short citation to define it. The Hindi public sphere united cultural, especially literary institutions such as publishing houses and literary associations with print media such as magazines, pamphlets and books. Educational institutions and political associations were also part of this new Hindi public sphere. Another important feature was the conscious reference to a collective identity defined by the use of Hindi. So what happened here was that was the first time that Hindi was consciously used and also standardized. Before that, it didn't happen for the Marwaris. And I claim that the journals became a semi-public space. So it was in the open, but it wasn't on the streets, it wasn't in the public. And the female or the feminized private household came to be a topic in this space for the first time. And that was mostly done by male actors, but later on there are also female writers who contribute and who write about these topics. And that is something I really want to look at, to see how it changed, how the discourse changed, and how do they define themselves. So now, the question, why would I focus on domesticity? Why would it be important? Because even today, you might think it's something that happens in the background. And I was asking the same question because I knew I was very interested in the topic, but how can I put arguments for it? How could I get funding for that kind of topic? And I came across a study by Judith Walsh, who studied advice literature in books and for the Bengali community. And she had a very good argument for studying that. She wrote, We need to abandon the 19th century's fiction that the domestic world is some lesser feminine sphere whose concerns and preoccupations can be kept separate from the rest, and to understand how completely and deeply the daily and the domestic are entwined in human life. So, what I think is what happened that privatized issues around the household, women and family, they were important means of establishing an identity for the self-definition of the Marwaris, but also the definition in contrast to the other bigger communities. Because Marwaris have always been a minority, although a financially strong one. And they did that through these mentioned topics, because they wanted to claim their own space in a metropolis like Calcutta that has always been diverse ethnically, religiously, linguistically, and culturally. And by looking at these magazines that I'm still collecting, I want to see how they construct and instrumentalize these topics for these very interesting and very urgent social cultural debates at that time. And I will read out another citation by Walsh, in which he says, placing the personal, familial, emotional, and intimate in historical context is one way of achieving a more profound understanding of how we live as humans in this world. It is also a way to challenge those remnants of the 19th century's belief in separate spheres, and the separate, subordinate status of both women and domestic life that have yet survived in modern times. So one can actually still draw a line from there, from the early 20th century till today, almost 100 years later. So the main questions I am going to ask for the next month when I'm working with my material is how are Marwari women portrayed in the Hindi magazines that I analyze, which roles are ascribed to them and how are these defined, what positions are taken in the articles on marriage, women's education, health, motherhood and others, and to what extent do they serve the self-definition and the identity construction within the Marwari community? What access did Marwari women themselves have to participate in that sphere, in that whole semi-public space? And is it as readers or maybe also as authors? That will be a difficult question because I know that readership studies are hard to do because of missing numbers or missing documents. And the last question would be, what impact did this new visibility have on Marwari women? And did it shape their everyday lives and their own self-image? Did they come out more, or what changed for them? What gains did they have through that? So I will conclude my main theories and the bigger questions that I'm asking. And my main arguments are first that Hindi journals in early 20th century Calcutta served as a central medium of communication for Marwaris, and they negotiated a collective identity in these. My second argument is that the developments within the Hindi journal landscape in Calcutta were largely driven by the Marwaris actively, and discourses on domesticity, marriage, the modern Indian women, and many other topics contributed to an expansion of the previous political debates. And the third and final argument, and also proposal, is that these new debates took place in the semi-public space of Hindi journals, which in turn formed a central part of a growing and self-conscious sphere for the community, and I call that the Marwari Hindi public sphere, in contrast to the North Indian Hindi public sphere, which is more well known, not that much, but very much centered in the North. And yeah, the outlook or my goals for the next years of research are to expand existing research, to show that Calcutta has always had space for all communities, that they claim their space and they struggle, of course, but they left their mark. And for me, that is Hindi literature. And I want to translate and analyze articles that have been kept sleeping for the past 100 years, to make it visible and to focus on these gender-specific topics that so far people found maybe less interesting, for many reasons, and to draw a connection to today even. Similar discourses in contemporary India, but also worldwide. This is not just an Indian topic. And for that I will locate more archives, collect more material, and then compare the journals that I'm hoping to find. And also my bigger plan is to digitize the journals I've worked with, because it's very relevant, as you will know. I have two examples of why. Well, luckily, the condition of Vishwamitra is very good in the library I'm working in, but some of them look like this. So you have very shoddy taping and parts of it are eaten away. Mostly it's legible for me, but the rest of the library has its own problems. You might know similar cases. So when I came in the first time, a mouse was running away from me, the cats are just sleeping. So this kind of scenario, and I don't know how long they would be in that condition, while the other books are rotting away behind me when I work on this one. So that's why I think digitization is very important. And also one of my findings was that matchstick, and I'm very happy that it didn't leave any more damage at that time. Yeah, so it's always surprising to work in the archive. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, madam, for your excellent presentation. It showcased your unique perspective on a particular community who tries to establish their identity through a particular language, and definitely the journals you are going to research on, I wish you all the best, because you've brought out pertinent questions which refer to women's agency, and you're trying to look at certain gaps, and where we point out to a difference between public sphere and private sphere, where the differences gradually, I hope, will reduce, and domesticity as a space for women's agency. Thank you so much for this unique presentation. It has definitely left a mark on all of us. Now the session is open for question and answer. If you have any direct question, I would request you to address the speaker from your chair.
I think the research is in a very primary stage, so you're just framing your hypothesis. So there's nothing to ask actually. So once you develop, and if you can come again after say after a few 1 year or so, then we think we'll get some idea. I think.
Then yeah, hopefully I have worked on the material more.
Yes.
Any questions from the students?
Okay, apart from the journals you're working on, what secondary sources you are looking for in literature?
Right now I'm looking for information on Hindi journals.
As Hindi journals will be primary source for you, right?
They were my primary source, but Hindi secondary literature on Hindi journalism, literature specifically in Calcutta. Because as I said, I had found this one journal, which I think is a women's journal, but I haven't heard about it before. So I want to know if maybe something has been written about it. also maybe information and education levels for schools. So to find out how many Marwari women were like in the education at that time, which schools were open, especially for women, because that will give a good indicator of what the readership is like. That's what I'm looking for.
I just have one question: that did you find any autobiography by the Marwari women?
Biography not, but sometimes there are histories of Marwari culture, and some of them have been by authors, by female authors.
Female authors.
I still go through the catalog of Vidyasagar, so there is a lot of that. Not sure about autobiographies.
Okay.
That would be also interesting.
Right. Because in Bengal we have Raj Sundari Devi who was writing an autobiography, Amar Jivan, and without any formal education.
Something similar would be interesting.
And also Krishna Bhavini Das, England e Bongo.
Oh yeah, she traveled.
She traveled to England.
Yeah, travel writing would be that would be a surprise. I look at the advertising as well. Sometimes they advertise books, especially for women, but that's mostly religious.
Okay.
So they still have a very narrow view of what they should read. Maybe it changes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
So I would now like to call upon Oyon, who is the Research and Documentation Officer for the Center. He works tirelessly behind the center, involving students with great amount of optimism.
Thank you.
So I would request him to come up and highlight upon the activities of the center and the future plans.
Thank you, madam. Actually, there is not much to say after such an exciting academic session. But I will say a few things here for accountability and formality. CRPCH has been around for 1 year. Following the visit by the NAC team to our campus, we have decided to hold a lecture every 2 months. This is the third in our lecture series. In addition, we have decided to hold an international seminar similar to the one held in February last year. The internship program is at our research center is also up and running, and about 12 first semester college students from a variety of departments have already signed up. Finally, I want to thank everyone who helped me to make this event a success. I would like to thank the teachers and the coordinators of both departments, our principal sir, our IQAC coordinator sir, our volunteers, and the people in the audience, and Sophie for your agreeing to come. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honor. Now I would request our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Abul Hussain, to deliver the vote of thanks. Sir.
A pleasant good morning to all of you. We were honored to host Sophie Dieckmann in our lecture series organized by CRPCH Department in Indian History, who took the initiative for this lecture. We thank Oyon Kundu for introducing you. We feel privileged to hearing from a research scholar from a reputed institution in Germany. It was quite inspiring to see such research interest in South Asian communities and their households from the other part of the world. We are excited to hear about your findings on domesticity in the Marwari community from the cultural historical perspective. We thank you for taking your time and effort to enlighten us with your research and hope to collaborate with you in future. Thank you all again.
come to the end of this lecture series. Thank you all for being with us. And in fact, this was the first time where an international scholar has come to our college to deliver a lecture in this lecture series. But however, we'll also have a session with her again at 2:30 when she will be talking about the prospects of learning German language. So I expect all of you to be with us again at 2:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.